Hello, everyone. My name is Fatima, and I am a family resource specialist for Latina Republic. This is going to be part one of our continuation for our Healthy Relationships program. And today I'm going to be talking to you all about healthy communication in relationships and conflict resolution. As part of this module, I am going to be defining what conflict is, what is its frequency and cause tells us. I'm also going to explain and debunk some myths and misconceptions that exist around conflict, as well as provide you with some very helpful techniques and tools to manage anger and conflict. We're also going to be expanding on ways to de-escalate conflict to move towards arguing better. So first, let's go ahead and define what is conflict. Conflict will usually happen when one's goals, opinions, motives, behaviors, or beliefs are incompatible or interfere with those of others. Essentially, we all have goals that we hope to achieve. But when we come together with someone in a relationship, some of those goals are going to have to become intertwined with the goals of our partners. For example, you may believe that higher education and acquiring a degree is the only way that a person can be successful, while your partner or spouse may think that there are other avenues that one can take in order to be successful. When it comes to child raising, this is going to be something that may produce or increase conflict in between you and your partner. Contrary to common belief, conflict is normal and unavoidable even in healthy relationships. It is safe to say that we couldn't possibly agree with everything our partners want all of the time. Like I mentioned before, our goals and lives are highly interdependent. Knowing that conflict and disagreement with our partners are inevitable, we can also learn that disagreements do not have to be destructive and negative for our relationships. How we respond in conflict matters and sets out the tone for how we're going to handle ourselves in that relationship. Now, let's go ahead and go over some myths and misconceptions that exist around conflict in relationships. I'm sure that some of you have heard some or many of these myths about conflict. These are common phrases that can be heard on TV, in the movies, and that are widely believed. However, this doesn't make them true, and in fact, makes us create unrealistic expectations around what conflict should be like in a healthy relationship. First, we have conflict is a sign of a bad relationship. If you're happy, you won't argue. The truth about this is that, how I mentioned before, conflict is normal in healthy relationships as well. The frequency and topics around conflict between healthy and unhealthy relationships are not that different, but the way that they argue and they handle conflict varies significantly. Next, we have I am who I am. You cannot control when you get angry. We are who we choose to be, and our actions and decisions don't always define us, but there is a time where we can choose to become in control of our actions and emotions. This happens through self-regulation, and I will be expanding more on it later in the module. While you have no control over the emotion of anger, you do have control over your reactions and how you respond to them. Our third myth is venting is good. Anger needs to be let out. While this may seem like a good idea to do in the heat of a disagreement under the belief that you shouldn't hold things in, venting when you're having feelings of anger can actually make you feel angrier and make you feel stressed for longer. Even when we think it might make us feel better to let out our anger on someone, in this case our partner, it actually leaves us feeling more distressed depending on how our partner reacts. They might respond with acceptance towards your anger and apologize, but chances are higher that they're going to become angry themselves because they expect us to treat them with tolerance and respect. Now, this myth is particularly important to explain. An argument needs to be physical to be abusive. The truth is that arguments between couples can become abusive even if there is no physical violence being exercised by either partner. Psychological and emotional abuse are significantly detrimental if they become a common practice in the way that we argue, especially because, due to this myth, these types of abuse go undetected and leave the abused partner feeling confused and hurt about the abuse. The next myth is very popular, and I'm sure many of us, if not all of us, have heard it at some point. The idea that opposites attract is very common, and it's also very wrong. Good, healthy relationships are more likely to have two people with more similarities over differences. Sharing the same interests, values, beliefs, and goals is important. Imagine a couple where the wife believes it's crucial that their kids go to church, but the husband sees this as an unnecessary and unimportant demand. Do you see how this will create more friction and conflict between the partners? It can be useful to balance each other out sometimes, but when it comes to issues that you really care about, you want to be more similar to your partner than different. Like we will be learning in the rest of the presentation, conversations and conflict may not be resolved right away. That takes us to our next myth. You should never go to bed angry with your partner. If you need time to rest and come back to a difficult conversation with a fresh mind in the morning, then that is okay. If you both can commit to making time to find a solution, then it should be okay to go to bed. Although it may not be the best sleep that you're gonna get. Just remember, it's okay if you want to take the night away from the conversation, but it is important that you communicate that with your partner and honor the time for revisiting the conversation. Our last myth here is sticks and stones may break my bones. This is a very popular phrase, yet again with the wrong message, at least when referring to those close of us. Maybe this can be true when people we aren't close to say something mean or critique us. But words do matter and can be very impactful in a relationship of any type. We want to create a habit around only saying things we mean, and understanding that saying hurtful or dishonest things will have a lasting impact on how our partner sees us and feels in the relationship. Now let's talk about a few misconceptions. These are incorrect views or opinions that are very common. In movies, TV shows, and novellas, we always see characters fighting for the love and overcoming all of the extremely difficult obstacles in a very dramatic way. And at the end, they just end up together and they're happy together. So, one big misconception that we have about conflict is that if you love each other, there has to be drama and passion in the relationship. Because of all of these media sources, we can internalize what we see on TV and believe that our relationship should contain drama and passion to know that it's real. In a healthy relationship, you can love the other person without making them fight for your love, and instead, together working towards a common goal. You don't need drama in the relationship to test its validity. And while passion is important, the relationship cannot be carried out by this emotion alone. The next misconception is conflict should be resolved at once, not talked about again. Have you ever heard or told your partner, "We already talked about this, I'm not talking about it again"? This is a misconception of finality in communication, where we believe that conflict is resolved at once and never brought up again. Healthy communication will require that some conversations are brought up more than once, and more than maybe you or your partner would like to. The key here is how the conversation is brought up and the purpose for having it again. Is it to clarify something? Is it for reassurance? Do you maybe have any new ideas about it that you didn't have before? Those are some acceptable reasons for why a conversation could happen a second, third, fourth, or another time. Next is believing that someone is right whilst the other person is wrong in a discussion. It is crucial that you treat conflict like you and your partner against the problem and not you versus your partner. Later in the workshop, we will talk about ways in which we can avoid pointing blame at our partner, even if they have done something that has offended us. Now, apologizing means accepting blame, or forgiving means that we accept the wrong behavior as okay. When you apologize, you recognize that something that you have done, even with the greatest of intentions, has made your partner feel a certain way. The moment you tell your partner or they tell you that something has hurt you or them, there is no questioning the validity of that feeling. The feeling is real, intended or not. In the same way, when our partner apologizes and you accept to let it go, it does not mean that you're allowing the other person to hurt you again. It just means that you're open to letting resentment go and giving the relationship another chance. Of course, if they keep doing the same offense and apologizing with no change observed, then you need to reconsider your status in the relationship. Another big misconception that we have is that when communicating, the goal is to get your point across at all costs. And while it is important that we convey our message, our goal should be to stop, listen, and make sure that we have also understood our partners while fighting fair and not doing or saying destructive things to get our point across. We will learn more about fighting fair in the second part of this workshop. Now, let's go ahead and move on to the frequency of course and course of conflict, where we're going to explore why conflict happens, more or less, and how it is handled. So, on average, married couples report 1 to 2 unpleasant disagreements per month. Now, notice, there is no lack of conflict, but it also does not happen too frequently. And the reasons for conflict can vary for each couple. Some couples may disagree about sharing household labor, whereas others may argue about spending more time together. Depending on moods, personalities, timing, couples can argue about pretty much everything. What differs between them is how often this happens and how they handle it. For example, when we talk about personality, it has been observed that people high in neuroticism are impulsive, and those high in agreeableness are more cooperative. This is based on personality types. People who are neurotic can suffer from anxiety and can be affected by environmental stress more often. Those with agreeable personality types are more laid back and can be more optimistic when dealing with conflict. Stage of life is another factor for how frequently conflict shows. Conflict may increase in young adulthood as life changes occur. As we get older, conflict stabilizes because we do not experience many life changes anymore. But when we put this into perspective, the immigrant community that we're serving and the immigrant couples in that community may be experiencing life changes even beyond young adulthood, and this could increase stress and conflict. A lack of good sleep after a disagreement may breed more conflict between couples. This is why, as I mentioned before, communication and honoring a time to talk in the morning is important before going to bed. Next, our attachment style, which is believed to be formed in our early life with our parents or caregivers. Our attachment style can show up in how we have relationships with others. Those with a secure attachment have less conflict and tend to manage conflict in a better way. Insecure individuals, however, respond with greater distress. This could be caused by anxiety that you're not good enough for your partner or fear of abandonment. Like we explored in our myths, similarity means that being too different creates friction and increases the likelihood of conflict. So those that are not very similar in most aspects may be arguing a lot more than those who are agreeing on most things. Consumption of alcohol can also add fuel to the fire. We become less agreeable, more hostile, and blaming. So it may be worth considering not having important or sensitive conversations when alcohol is involved. Just know that some of these factors may be out of your control or simply part of who you are, but becoming aware of them may allow you to discover ways to reduce conflict. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the types of couples when it comes to conflict and the course of conflict. While I go through these, try to think of patterns in your own relationship that may allow you to identify your and your partner's conflict style. John Gottman is a marriage researcher dedicated to studying conflict between couples. He identified these four types of couples when it comes to conflict: volatile, validating, avoidant, and hostile. Couples who are volatile argue frequently and passionately. They have high levels of negative affect, which means that negative emotions are often brought to the surface. These emotions can be hurt, anger, disappointment, but they also are evidently fond of each other. They're very passionate about getting their point across, but at the end of the day, they use these arguments to make better relationships once they make up. Validating couples fight politely, collaborate, and work through problems. And even though their discussions are very heated, empathy and understanding are always present. In this type of couple, we can find a lot of self control and calmness when arguing. Compromise is the ultimate goal for both partners. Avoidant couples rarely argue, they have great difficulty in confronting issues, and they fix problems on their own or wait it out. Couples with this style don't do much give and take and just accept things for how they are as they can become overwhelmed. Even though they aren't open to conflict, they also do not have many negative effects to overcome. According to Gottman, these three types are very different, yet they can all stay together and overcome conflict if the benefits of the relationship are higher than the cost. This is something that you will not find in hostile couples since they can be high in criticism, defensiveness, and contempt. They are meaner to each other, and conflict becomes dangerous for their relationship. These couples are, as a result, less satisfied and have fewer chances of sticking together. Even though the validating type sounds like something we should aspire to, remember that there are so many factors play into how we argue. We can still have heated and frequent arguments with our partners, but what matters is that in the end, you feel content with the overall relationship. Conflict doesn't have to be a sign of a bad or toxic relationship. Instead, it can help us understand the truth about our partners and not romanticize the idea that healthy means perfect or free of conflict. Now, in the course of conflict, what instigates it? When we talk about attributions, we refer to differing perspectives brought to an interaction that can be a source of disagreement. We all have self serving biases that lead us to believe that our actions are favorable and fair. Attributional conflict reflects us arguing about whose explanation is right and whose action is right. There can be agreement of what was done, but partners disagree as the reason for why. For example, you and your partner may be arguing because your partner didn't take out the trash. You both agree that the trash was not taken out, but you insist that your partner did this to annoy you, while your partner tells you that they didn't have time to do it. This can promote and engages in negative affect reciprocity, in which both partners exchange negative comments and provocations back and forth. Happy couples can engage more in cognitive editing, where they respond to a negative comment in a neutral or even positive manner. So, in a way, editing the message received to be something that is not negative by making positive attributions to the other person. Instead of thinking of your partner wanting to annoy you, you may think he, she, or they were busy this week. I'm sure that's why the trash wasn't taken out, but I will ask to make sure. This is going to require insight and emotional regulation. Insight means that you get to know your partner and you become aware of why they do things, and then you trust that. By regulating your emotion, you're also avoiding just reacting and blaming, and instead taking the time to think of possible reasons why the other person might have done what they did. To find out where our messages are being miscommunicated, you can try the talk table technique with your partner. In this exercise, you will structure a problem solving discussion in the following way. So, partner one starts a discussion and selects the intended impact of their message. That can be rated from super negative, neutral to super positive. Next, partner number two on the receiving end rates the actual impact and responds accordingly, selecting their intended impact. Following that, partner number one then receives that message, rates its impact, and responds. This process is continuous throughout the entire conversation, and studies have found that both happy and unhappy couples send messages with a positive impact, but those who feel less satisfied tend to see these messages as negative. Think about it. Could we be making unfair negative attributions on our partners? And would receiving them differently, possibly more positively, help our conversations? Now, remember, our perceptions are often subjective, and even if they seem as the only truth, Sometimes there are other factors that become part of the reality. And with that technique, we are going to conclude part one of our healthy relationships conflict resolution workshop. Make sure to check out part two so that you can learn some tools for anger management and de escalation and arguing productively.